The study
Jeff,
session.
you know, Jeff comes sometimes anyway. I was just gonna say, we don't have the department head tonight, but give him a chance to speak.
Did we get a
about
thumbs
why-
up from BCAT? Thumbs up?
He's here.
Okay. I'm going to call to order there we go. I'm going to call to order the Poulsbo City Council workshop, not business meeting, workshop of August 12th. I'm going to start with the land acknowledgement and call on Councilman Rick Eckert to my right, if you would, Rick.
Yes, Mayor. Poulsbo is located on the ancestral lands of the indigenous Suquamish people, for whom this place is known as Tuk Tuk Lots, or the land of the vine maples. And then our quote we have here from Chief Seattle: "Every part of this soil is sacred in the estimation of my people. Every hillside, every valley, every plain and grove has been hallowed by some sad or happy event in days long vanished." That was Chief Seattle in the year 1854.
Thank you, Councilman. Now, if you would please join us, if you can, in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The first item of business is the agenda review for the workshop, and the agenda stands, so I would entertain a motion to approve tonight's workshop agenda.
I move to approve tonight's workshop agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and we stand with the agenda. The next item is going to be public comment. We're going to have 2 periods of public comment. Now at the beginning of the workshop and again at the end of the workshop. So I will call now for any public comment. If you have any, please come to the podium behind us here.
How about one public? She's there.
And you'll have 3 minutes, and please state your name and place of residence for the record. And calling again for public comment and not seeing any, we're going to move right into the workshop agenda, Council. We have 5 items tonight. We have our Washington Cities Insurance Association's Council Do's and Don'ts training, followed by derelict vessel program presentation. Thirdly, we're going to have an update notice of funding opportunity on our STEP housing program. Related to that, the 4th item will be City of Poulsbo Homeless to Housed Action Plan, and then we will have questions and concerns of the council. So let's start with our Washington Cities Insurance Association Do's and Don'ts training. And if you would come up and introduce yourself, we're glad you're here.
Is that on or off? Okay. So I am Ann Bennett. I am the Executive Director of Washington Cities Insurance Authority. I am proud to say that last week I celebrated my 30th year at WCIA. So as you all know, that's quite a milestone. And I tell everybody I was a child prodigy.
And you've obviously learned what to do and what not to do.
I have. I've seen a lot in my days. I will tell you that cities, I personally believe, are just a fantastic form of democracy. It's where I see really good advocacy, really good government. And I have been, like I said, associated with cities for a long time, and I am proud to be associated with cities. So I'm going to go over who we are, what we do. The do's and don'ts is really from a liability perspective, because that's mainly where the exposures are. So we'll talk through quite a bit. I love questions. I think a lot of times this presentation is enhanced by your questions. So feel free during the presentation to ask any questions that you may have. So who are we? We're actually a municipal entity that was created back in 1981 by 9 cities. Cities are bad risks. I'll put it out there right now, and you're going to see some of that through the presentation. And the insurance companies basically said, we do not want to take on cities anymore. We are going to cancel your insurance. So there was legislation passed that allowed cities to pool their risk together and create risk pools. We are a nonprofit. We insure over 165 members. We have over $222 million in assets. The neighbors of yours that we have Bainbridge, we have Bremerton, we have Shelton down the road, we have Edmonds if you take the ferry, which I just did. So we've got all across the state from Ocean Shores to Spokane Valley to Pullman and down south to Camas. So we have a large group of members. We're run entirely by a board of directors made up of members. Our main mission is to assist you in reducing loss. And to that end, we have all kinds of risk management programs that we offer. Every single member gets an assigned risk management rep, where the city can call and say, what's my risk if, what do you think if we decide to do this? And we give advice. We also have programs that allow you to consult with attorneys, like, on a specific issue. Hey, can you run this by one of your attorneys? And we do that. And that's all included in your membership. We also have extensive training, both that we put on, and then we have an online training system with a variety of online trainings that we offer. Our rates are transparent. They're set by an actuary. You can see how they're set. And they are stable rates, because that's one of the other tenets of pooling, is you're pooling it together and there's a lot of smoothing of rates, so you don't have the spikes. Like you and I can have a car accident and your insurance goes way up. That doesn't happen here. Now, there are times when your losses do affect it, but so do your workers. That's what we use to do your rates, is we look at your worker hours as your exposure base. And then I think the best thing about being a member of the pool is that coverage decisions are made by me. And my desire is to look to find coverage rather than deny it. There are things that I don't cover. I don't cover public records. I don't cover Open Public Meeting Act violations. And it's mainly because those are areas where they want to have enforcement and make sure that it's a penalty if you don't follow it. So those areas we don't, but we cover you for auto liability, general liability, employment practices, errors and omissions, which is land use. And you have 20 million per occurrence. WCIA self-funds the first 5 million per occurrence. After that, we use a pool of pools. It's a national pool. And then we go out to a reinsurance market. And we'll kind of go into what's happening out there. But we also offer other coverages, which is your building, your autos, boiler machinery, cyber, pollution, all of that as well. So what's going on? And the reason that we're doing this training and we're including this is we want you to know what's going on in the insurance market. This is a very, very challenging time. Generally, insurance markets are cyclical. You have hard markets and soft markets, and it used to go like this, used to have kind of a trend line. And what we found is what's called a sustained hard market. And a lot of that is because of the tort liability exposure in Washington state. So just to give you an idea, actually this number's gone up. Our reinsurance rates have gone up about 750% over 10 years. It's shocking. When we were renewing for our 2026, we used to only hold 4 million in our retention, and we were forced to go up to 5 million. This is going on throughout different pools. The same things happened with the county, the schools. It's all throughout the risk pool industry. And so our property rates, though, are experiencing a soft market. So we're saving money there, which is helping the liability program, because we haven't had major property events, which are, earth-shattering, Hurricane Sandy, Hugo, things like that. That's what turns the property. The good news is, even though you're seeing this, WCIA's average rate has only gone up 3%. overall. That doesn't mean your rates haven't, because that it gets modified by losses and modified by worker hours. But 2026, it was 3%, and 2027, it's going to be 3%. And that's something that our board decides. So they actually vote on what that increase will be. We use an actuary, but they see it, they decide, they vote on it. So what's going on in Washington? Here's a couple of the headlines that you should see. And actually, I look at this now and think I should probably update this because there's even bigger numbers out there. I think you probably saw Seattle got hit with a $30 million verdict in the CHOP case. The state has been hit with a $150 million verdict. And the state itself right now is 1 billion with a B behind in their state tort fund. So they are projecting $1 billion in the red in their tort fund. A lot of what's driving this is something called nuclear verdicts. And this was a study done a couple years ago by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Washington is number 3 per capita in large verdicts. That's because for public entities, we don't have immunities in Washington. We don't have tort caps that other states have. And so it keeps rising, these dollar amounts. And I, in fact, was talking to a legislator yesterday about this topic because the state is actually, because of their debt, they started looking at tort reform. They're talking about it. They've had a committee, they had a meeting today where they're discussing what this would look like. But there is a move to at least talk about it. Whether it's going to pass or not, big question.
And didn't we have sovereign immunity to some degree here in the state of Washington?
Many
And
years
what
ago,
happened?
it was abolished. It was the state decided that they no longer wanted to have sovereign immunity, and so it was abolished. And the immunities that did exist have been eroded. There were case law immunities in law enforcement that have been eroded. The wrongful death statute in 2018 was amended and expanded. So what's happened is you've had an erosion of immunities, an erosion of both statutory and case law immunities, and expansion of liability through case law decisions. And there's a lot of expansion out there. So I tell you this because, I want you to realize, when I'm telling you about these liabilities, the exposures that our members are facing, they are very, very significant. And we'll talk about some of the cases and some of the numbers that we've had, but it really is influencing how we do business. And frankly, I told a legislator yesterday, if this continues, it is not sustainable. I can't charge enough money to cities if this continues. We are struggling to get reinsurance partners. I was at a conference. We use Lloyd's of London very heavily in our property market. If you know Lloyd's, they'll insure anyone, anything. They won't insure me. And so I actually ran across a liability underwriter and I said, oh, I'd love to meet with you. We go over for our property program. Can we have a meeting? And he's like, oh, where are you from? And I said, well, we have cities in the state of Washington. He goes, yeah, no, we're not gonna talk to you. I'm like, okay. Let me know if things change. And to me, that's very telling because we now have an international reputation as well. No. So that's enough of the bad news. We're going to get into good news now. And this is where we're going to start talking about how you as a council can avoid liability. And that's really my message, is because tort law is so bad, the best way is to just not to avoid the loss altogether through risk management.
Just real quick, when you say you're talking to the legislator, even if you could charge cities enough, do they understand that that just means that's cost we pass on to the citizens? Because we don't make money. I mean, we charge for services and taxes. So, I mean, do they get that any increase you encounter and pass to us, we just have to pass to the citizens?
That has been my message.
Okay.
And what I have been saying is I have cities cutting programming to pay this bill. I have never been the line item at the top of a discussion as to what, this is so expensive, we have to cut something.
Yeah.
And that has been my message. I mean, the taxpayer is the one footing this bill, 100% their
Yeah,
constituents.
it's not paying our insurance is
And-
not nice to do.
You have to have insurance. And, at the same time, it shouldn't be one of your top costs. And one of our members actually had earmarked about $1 million for a program on homelessness. And they called me and said, we have to take that $1 million and put it to your bill. And I'm telling everybody that. That's not okay. It's not right. Yeah.
Is WCIA collaborating or working with the AWC's lobbying arm?
Yeah.
Okay. And are cities becoming more aware, or do you think there's getting enough momentum and
I think
for
so.
some sort of reform?
And what I'm actually meeting with Candace tomorrow. So we work quite a bit together. And so to be honest, I'm the data person. I have all the data for her. So we work collaboratively. I don't know if I know it's always been on their legislative agenda to support. I don't know if they're going out in front. The Association of Counties is going out in front and they are lobbying for it. Candace and I talk a lot about these issues and make sure. I think there is momentum. I think the best thing you can do is talk to your own legislator. They're hearing it. They really are. And your personal stories are important.
Thank you.
Mhm. So, how can you avoid liability? Well, let's start with the good news. You as an individual receive absolute immunity for your legislative activities. As you know, key to a good democracy is good debate. You're adopting budgets, ordinances, resolutions. And so you can't be sued when you are doing these legislative activities individually. Many years ago, you could. And I remember at the time thinking, why would you want to be a city council person if you can get sued? That's just, because that was my world. But then a good case law came out that said, no, you get immunity for that. So remember, it's only in the context of what you're doing within the meetings as a whole, and it's your legislative activities that get you here, not acting as an individual. So that's really good news. So I'm going to go by different topics. The first one I'm going to tell you about is land use. And for the most part, when I first started at WCIA, this was a huge exposure. And then we started advocating for the use of hearing examiners, which I know you guys do. So it really lessens your exposure to appearance of fairness allegations that you're making arbitrary and capricious decisions. And it also helps because you can now hear from your constituents, talk to your constituents, and you're not at risk of, saying you're not objective during an appeal process. So hearing examiners are a great tool. Now, that doesn't mean you can't get yourself into trouble still. And we have a couple examples of where councils inserted themselves into the land use process in a different way. So the first one is a very old case. It was one of ours, Westmark versus the city of Burien. This involved a apartment complex that was being built on a very steep hillside in the city of Burien before it incorporated. It was King County's project. Burien incorporated, and the decision was to take on this project. I will tell you, Burien didn't have a lot of staff at the time, and there were lots and lots and lots of delays. Now, this can't happen now because land use laws changed since then, but there was a lot of delay. So this project went on for years. There was at one point a settlement agreement. They had sued. There was a settlement agreement. We agreed to pay $200,000. The city council had agreed to, in theory, agree to some of the demands that they had for development. So what happens is there's a settlement agreement, it's done, it's signed, everybody walks away, lawsuit dismissed. And then the city council comes up and says, you know what, we never approved that in open session. So yeah, we don't have to follow through on our end of the bargain. And so there was a lawsuit on that. And the lawsuit basically said, hey, it's breach of contract. We had a contract. You got to do this. And the court said, well, no, they didn't approve it in open session. So we can, it isn't valid, and we'll allow them to refile their lawsuit and start again. So it started all over, and we ended up going to trial. And what we thought we were going to trial on was the fact that this was a very environmentally sensitive project that the developer hadn't fully developed their record, or nor did they do the proper studies for this development, and that's what the delay was. The delay was on their part. The jury completely disagreed with that, and they said, no, this was purposeful. The city council is on the record saying they didn't want apartments. There's a complete record of them saying that they don't like this project. In fact, they even backed out of the deal. And the jury awarded $10 million. And this was in 2008, before this world, this was shocking. And so what do you do when you get a big verdict like that? You appeal it. And so we went to the Court of Appeals, and the decision came out and just excoriated the city, saying, they went well beyond the rules in trying to stop this project. The council was, staff must have felt threatened. They interfered with the business. Everything was on the record. So again, at the time, we were thinking, well, but the staff, we have this other argument that wasn't the part that we thought they'd hit on, and they did. The other one I'll tell you about is for a city that isn't ours, which is Spokane, and it's called Mission Springs. And this was a big development that they had gone through the process, was fully vested, and the community members started coming up and saying, we don't like this project. What are you going to do to stop it? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? How are you going to stop it? And so the mayor then decides that at the council meeting, he is going to, it wasn't on the agenda, ask the development director for an update on the project. So he says, we have a lot of citizens here. What's going on with the project? And he said, well, we're ready to issue grading permits. And he says, well, I am forbidding you from issuing grading permits. So the city attorney stood up, and I think your city attorney would stand up and say, let's go into an executive session and have a discussion. For whatever reason, and I still have never had an answer, this city attorney stood up on the record and said, you can't do that. That is against the law. You're breaking the law if you order that. And the mayor said, I don't care, do not issue the permits. So, okay, then next meeting, the developer comes up and says, you either issue these grading permits or I'm suing you. And they said, sue us. Well, what happened was that they did sue, and the court found that they violated the law intentionally and knowingly. So what happens when you intentionally, knowingly violate the law?
Damages?
Well, you can't get punitives against the city in Washington. That's one thing you can't get, but you don't get insurance coverage.
Oh, no.
It's because it has to be an accident. So their insurance carrier denied coverage. And to this day, I know there was a lot of money paid. I have no idea who paid it. There was all kinds of litigation over the coverage denial. But this is my plea, is listen to your city attorney. I know that they will take you into executive session, but if you are advised that this is not a good idea, I suggest that you follow legal advice. None of you would ever do that. I know that. I just want to have a little chat about development agreements. I just want you to know they are a great tool. They're a way that you can look at a big development and have certainty about it and certainty with the developer. Just know they're a contract. And so contract law does apply. Yes.
I'm a new council member. What's a development agreement?
It's exactly what it says. It's a contract about how a development will proceed, and it's between the council and the developer. And it's actually a legal document that says, this is how we are going to scope this project, and this is how it's going to be handled.
Yeah, so if I may, just a second, Michael, if you remember a couple months ago, the parcel at the end of Fourth, we had to remove some easements and various other pieces that were part of a 40-year-old or from the 70s development agreement.
Yep.
So that development agreement basically laid the conditions in order for the housing department authority to sell it. We had to pull some of those pieces out.
Got it. Great reference. Thank you.
Yep.
And I bring this up because, I have seen some members get sued for development agreements, and it's not covered by me because it is a straight up contract. So just know that it is a contract, and we can't insure a contract because it's, you are supposed to follow the terms of the contract. I also will say there's been a couple of decisions that have come out, and generally they have an end date. Most development agreements will have an end date of, this agreement is good for 5 years. One of our members had a development agreement, and basically the agreement ended, and then they completely changed their land use laws. And when the developer said, well, wait a second, you kind of sat on my project waiting out the development agreement. So my project, I can't make my project under your new rules. And the court agreed that they kind of sat it out. And so they gave them more time under the development agreement.
Yeah, that's one of the things, Michael, is the agreement locks them into the codes at the time of the agreement too. So like Oslo, prior to what's there, they had an agreement for an entirely different project under 20-year-old, I think, building codes, land use codes, et cetera. And they came and said, we don't want to do that anymore. Will you release us? And what was good on the city's part is now whatever they came back with had to be with current codes, SEPA, everything. So, because that was all going to be single family homes and other things. It wasn't going to be the apartments. So it locks you in. It's like it freezes everything at the point of when you sign the contract.
And they can be, like you said, 20 years old. I mean, they can go for a long time. And what a lot of my members have found is, do you want to lock a future council into those decisions? You may want to. It's just, I let you know because I've seen a lot of situations where there's a development agreement, new council comes in and doesn't like it. And so it can create, some concerns. And I'll just let you know that one isn't mine. So personnel, I would say stay in your legislative role as a council member. You want to leave the hiring, firing, management of employees to the mayor. And nothing good comes of city council getting involved in personnel issues. I have seen city council members called as witnesses at trial. I have seen all kinds of bad messaging going on. So, your role is policy, budget, and code. And getting into other areas of hire and fire issues is not a good idea. And, oh, yeah.
I was just how does that come into play? So where we will vote to approve after a hire. So like, or an appointment. So like city administrator, mayor hires city administrator, but then we vote to approve that decision after the hire has already happened. Or the mayor appoints a judge and then we vote to approve that after it's already been offered. So like, how does that work into this? Because especially with hiring, where there's a contract, say the administrator's already accepted the job and then we vote down, we say no.
Yep.
Does that change this equation at all? Or is
there's certain
that
things
understood in the contract?
Yeah, it depends on why you say no. And I'll leave you, I hate to give you that legal answer, but if you say no because of a discriminatory reason, that could be a problem. You could have some type of breach of implied contract. But at the same time, the code gives you the right to affirm the decision. And so I don't know, again, I think you have to be careful as to the reason why you say no, but you have the right per code. And what I'm kind of getting into is a city employee comes to you and says, my boss is really mean, I want you to do something, or I want to tell you that I'm being discriminated against, but I don't want you to do anything about it. Don't tell anybody. That you don't want to get involved in, and you want to say, I'm sorry, I can't promise you that. I have to tell the mayor or the city administrator. And then you step back. I've had council members become advocates for employees against the decisions being made. And personnel law is very complex, and we actually have a whole program where we have personnel attorneys available to help cities work through these. You can have all kinds of issues in employment. And so we want to make sure it's done right. And we will, it's basically as long as you need the advice, we'll keep giving the advice. So what I would say is that's really what I'm kind of focusing on, is that idea of involvement. And then if you see harassment and discrimination going on, you must report it. You are aware, let the city administrator know, let the mayor know that you have seen this, and then, they have an obligation to look into it. You yourselves are held to the city's harassment discrimination policy. So again, I say follow the platinum rule, is treat others as they would like to be treated. You can get into arguments of, is it legal discrimination, illegal discrimination? Is it legal harassment, illegal harassment? I mean, there's all kinds of law on this. Just treat people right and you'll be fine. You don't have to, that's how I always look at it, is we can go into depth on that, but know your policy, know that this is an area, if you violate it, you can be sued individually. I have had elected officials that were sued individually for inappropriate touching of employees. It became an issue in their reelection, where women were standing outside with signs saying, I don't like being touched. And, it didn't go well for that individual at reelection. So again, know the policies, know what's appropriate. And I think most of us do know that. So again, definitely report anything you see. It's very important. So this is a weird one. And I bring this up because oftentimes you are asked a lot of questions. And so this is an area called negligent misrepresentation. And what I will tell you is that this is an area where you can say, I don't know, but I know who has the answer. So let me give you a good example of this so that we can talk it through. So we have a member whose entire downtown has cedar shingle. It's very quaint. It's all cedar shingle. And a business owner came in one day. The building official wasn't there that day for whatever reason, and was talking to the mayor and said, hey, I have to replace my siding and I can't afford cedar shingle. So either that gets waived or I have to close my business. And so the mayor said, well, we don't want you. We don't want your business. You're a valued member of the business community. We don't want it closed. Yeah, you don't have to put up the cedar shingle. And so he starts tearing it down and putting up composite, and building official goes down and red tags it and says, you can't do that. It's against code. And he said, but I had an assurance from the mayor that I could do this. And so we looked at it, and what negligent misrepresentation says is, if you make a specific promise or assurance, somebody relies on that, and it's to their detriment, they're damaged because, they relied on your promise or assurance, then that is a negligent misrepresentation for which they're entitled to damages. So in this case, we paid for his costs of removing what he had put up on the composite. Yeah.
So would you say that it's okay that whenever I'm approached by a citizen, I start with, by the way, I make no specific promises or assurances?
Fantastic.
Okay, great.
Fantastic. And you can,
Basically, I can't tell
Yeah.
you anything.
right. And you can say, but I know who
Great.
can help you at staff, at a staff
But
level.
do
Hey,
I
quick question.
really? I'm
I
just kidding. I'm kidding.
I don't know.
I did.
But that's
This-
the idea, is that you have specialists here on staff. They're specialists. They're your go-to people. Don't take matters into your own hands. That's the big one.
Awesome.
So, and this is, I was going to wait till the end of the slides here, but this is a good moment to ask. Could you share with us a definition of agency duty? It's a little more nuanced than what you were just talking about, and how that proscripts us or not. The term agency duty, the meaning.
The meaning, well, I'm not a lawyer, but what I will tell you is that when you're asking me that, you're saying, what is the duty of the city you're an agent of the city? Is that what you're asking me? Okay. So you are all agents of the city, and therefore, your actions, and in fact, I cover you for your actions as city council member, you can bind the city to liability. So as an agent of the city, if you make a promise to someone, I'll give you a good claim example. Back in the day, I would handle sewer backups. They weren't fun. And so oftentimes elected officials would get a phone call and they say, don't worry, we're going to take care of everything. We're going to get your house back. We'll pay for it all. And then, Anne would do her investigation and find out that a contractor put concrete in the manhole, down the manhole cover, and that's what caused the blockage. The problem is because you are a speaking agent for the city, as the council person who said we take care of everything, I have a problem because you made that specific, so does that answer? Okay.
And that doesn't apply to, so this is a kind of a nuance area, just because I'm a policy buff, I can't help but ask the question. Does that apply to campaign promises?
No.
What about currently elected officials?
If you're campaigning and
Rerunning.
you're saying, I want to do this, I want to
I
do
want to fix
that.
all the potholes in Poulsbo. There won't be a single pothole when you elect me.
That's campaigning.
Okay,
So, I mean,
Gotcha.
you're not
So
speaking
you
for the
can-
city, you're speaking for yourself
Got it.
individually.
which is why you're
or
strictly
election.
forbidden from campaigning when you're doing city business.
Yep.
Because basically campaigning is lying. Thank you. Thank you.
So, and if I could just finish this, all of us under the Constitution have First Amendment free speech rights. But once we're elected and part of this body that we've elected to be part of, we also have a responsibility to that body, right?
Mhm.
That tempers some of our speech and representations because we have a legal duty to represent that organization. Could you expand just slightly on what the inverse agency
Yes.
duty means?
And so I'm going to get a little bit into that a little bit later on one topic. But what I will say is I did have a member city where a council person was using the city's letterhead to advocate against an official position of the city. And so the idea was you can't do that. And they actually sanctioned that individual because that's not, you can't, you must be speaking for the city and you can't use the city letterhead to do that. So you have certain, as you said, First Amendment rights, but remember what you are saying, you're often looked upon as a member of this council. And you have to be aware of that line. And I say, sometimes it will be brought up in other arenas, what you're saying out there.
So like you were saying, this is a nuanced kind of thing, I think. So I'm thinking the line comes where it's like, I'll look into it versus I'll fix it.
Right.
So, because we get asked to look into things all
Oh, yeah.
the time.
Yep.
And it's only when you promise I'll look into it and fix it that now we are in trouble. It's,
Absolutely.
I promise to look into it without a commitment of a result.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. You're right on the nose there. Did I answer your question, Mayor?
You did.
Okay.
There have been times in just my experience with the city where certain council people were elected and had an agenda against the city.
Right.
But they also have an agency duty to stand by the city and safeguard the city under the law called agency duty. There's a
Yes.
split there.
Yep.
And so it could really rub.
Yep.
And just for clarity, that's separate from saying the free speech part of it, which you brought up, means we can still say, in my personal opinion or in my personal capacity, I would be in favor of doing this or that. However, yeah, if you're asking me about what the city's position or policy or what the council is going to do, come to a meeting and make public comment.
Yeah.
Right. That's the separation between the free speech is the first part, the fiduciary duty is the second
Right.
part.
Exactly. And I will say there's some really good resources through AWC and MRSC kind of on the roles and responsibilities of council members. I'm sure most of you have gone through a lot of their sessions, but there's really good resources on both of those with regard to agency duty. So I would definitely suggest looking at their resources. And this kind of is a nice segue into defamation. What I would say is, in general, if you have a statement or opinion, you're legislating, you're still within that immunity. Now, what you need to be careful about is individuals. And there is broad discretion to counsel when you're talking about public officials of a certain stature. But that is really, I would warn you against that because one untruth can give rise to liability. So, that's why I'm saying on this slide, are they a public official? Are they staff? Are they a private individual? Staff and private individual, you could be on the hook for defamation. If you are talking about an individual and you are putting it out there in public, it could be problematic in terms of defamation. So I had a member who had a council member who did not like a particular staff member and would say, I don't trust you. You're a liar. You're misrepresenting what's going on during meetings. And so this person then left the city and went to a new job and then sued the city for defamation. This council member, we found out, not only made comments on the public record, but contacted the new employer and said, do you know who you have? This person is a liar. They are misrepresenting facts. So what happened when the lawsuit came in is that we said, you know what, calling that person's employer, that's not within the course and scope of your duties as a council member. I'm not defending that. And so I would say be very, very careful. Again, let's go back, treat others how you would like to be treated. Would you like somebody saying these things about you? No, you would not. So again, I will, now that we talked about elections, I'm going to tell you the converse. You can say whatever you want about your opponent. We actually have case law, U.S. Supreme Court case law that says you can defame your opponents in elections. I mean, it's one, I'll just leave that out there, that it went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court that said elections, you can defame your opponents all you want during elections. Don't recommend it. So public works, this is an area that a lot of people, I want to kind of explain the law, and this is actually an area where we're talking to legislators about. So we have something in our state called joint and several liability. There are about 10 states that have this. 40 states don't have joint and several liability. In the state of Washington, what joint and several liability says is if a plaintiff is fault-free, so they have to be fault-free, and there are multiple defendants, if there is at least 1% of fault to a defendant, they can be responsible for the entire judgment. Juries don't know about it. So we've had cases where we were found 10% at fault and we are 100% paying all the damages because the other person didn't have insurance. So this is also a phrase that is used called deep pocket liability, where often your getting sued is a product of the bad doer not having enough insurance or assets to cover the injuries of the other party. So you'll often find that there's a horrific accident. If the person who caused the accident does not have proper assets to cover the injuries of the party, they will then look to the city in terms of road design. They will say you didn't have proper lighting, your crosswalk wasn't proper, you didn't have the proper traffic control devices. What ends up in these cases is they become engineering malpractice cases. So they have engineers on their side, we have engineers on our side. And that's why political engineering can be very dangerous. And what do I mean by political engineering is when you say, you know what we need? We need a crosswalk and we need it right there. And it's not engineered and you put it in. You haven't followed the law, you haven't followed proper guidance. And if someone is injured in that crosswalk, they're going to say, this was a bad design. You shouldn't have had a crosswalk there. I was doing this training, I had a mayor say, hey, I got a story for you. About 50 people showed up at a council meeting one night and said, you've got to do something. You've got to put a stop sign in on this street because there's all kinds of people who are going to get hit, pedestrians. We need to slow things down. You need to put in a stop sign. And so said, we need a stop sign, put in a stop sign. They put in a stop sign. He said, I kid you not, Ann. The next meeting after that stop sign went in, I probably had 250 people saying somebody's going to get killed because the backup that has been caused by that stop sign is creating more conflict. And that's because that's what engineers study. What is, does it meet the proper warrants? Traffic flow needs to occur. I will say this is an area where if people come to you, you want to make sure you're listening to your traffic engineer. You want to avoid inflammatory statements. Horrible accidents happen. And you want to say something, and you, as a council, feel for that family. I have had council members say, how many people have to die before we fix this? How many, accidents is it going to take? And there was nothing wrong. It was engineered that way. It's appropriate engineering. Just because an accident happens doesn't mean it's wrong. And it also, you can have situations. I had a horrible case where a child was in a crosswalk, was killed. The driver said, I never saw the child because the sun was in my eyes. But the council had come out immediately after saying, you know what it is? It's the speeding on that street. And you know what? I've seen lots of near misses on that crosswalk. There was nothing wrong with the crosswalk. And the driver admitted that she never saw because of the sun in her eyes. So again, this is an area where I would ask you to be very compassionate, but also realize that this can cause liability. And I've had council members as witnesses at trial that plaintiff attorneys has called as their witness to say, you knew there was something wrong. So again, just be aware of this, have staff respond to requests and have your engineers look at these issues from that perspective. Yes.
So this was the slide where I had a few questions percolating as I was prepping for this. So I wanted to know the relationship between everything you just shared, which is very sensible, and the absolute immunity that you talked about at the beginning. And what I'm envisioning here is a legislative decision to approve a project. And let's say that the council is not agreed, and the basis for the disagreement is whether this is appropriate or not. Mm-hmm. Because if you have a situation where maybe some members of the council agree with staff, but others do not, I would have thought that disagreement and vocalizing that disagreement would fall under the absolute immunity. But it sounds like here you're saying maybe not. So
your absolute immunity is for you as an individual.
Right.
That doesn't give the city immunity, number one.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to throw a whole other thing at you. There is something called discretionary immunity where, and I'll be honest, we've argued it a lot. It gets granted to the state a lot because of the dollar amounts of the project, but there is some discretionary immunity of how you spend your dollars as a city. So let's say you have several projects in the works, and it's a capital improvement over time, and you have the discretion of what you're fixing when you're fixing it. So if you're on the record saying, yes, we are aware of this, and we're budgeting here, 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 and here, there is an argument to be made that you have the discretion on how to spend those dollars. And they give discretionary immunity. The courts don't grant it a lot. And where that's come about are kind of these massive state road design cases where there's those barriers, like they didn't put a barrier on a state highway. And the answer is because it would be, $20 billion and they don't have the money. Right. And so, but it was studied, it was looked at, and it went in front of the, legislature who did not approve the project. It has to go in front of the governing body. So it's kind of close to what you're saying.
So if there's a project that we've been looking at, so we're discussing it in council over maybe a year. And so we're discussing this project repeatedly. We've identified it as something we want to work on and why. Mm-hmm. But then something happens from the start of that to when it's actually fixed. How does that come into play? Because, some of these projects take a long time from initial conversation to concept to design to building to completion. So, we could say something's dangerous and that's why we got to fix it. And we've identified it. It's been brought by staff and it's all been discussed, but it might be a year until that project's over.
Mhm.
And who knows what could happen in that year.
So first of all, you're going to never say the word, it's a dangerous road. You're going to say, I'm going to make a safe road safer. That's first thing. You're not going to use that term. What I will say is again, this is an erosion. It used to be when you were studying a road for safety improvements, that information was not subject to discovery or usage at trial. That's kind of being eroded. So the answer I'm going to give you is you're looking at making a safe road safer during this project. We would still make the argument it's a safe road, even though you're looking to improve it. Will that fly? I don't know, be honest with you. It may be that that's why you don't want to have the inflammatory statements. You're just studying it. Now, again, we would make the argument for you, discretionary immunity, but they're going to say you had notice of this road. And if you're making statements that say it's dangerous, you're just, you have improvements that you can do. If it truly is a dangerous road, there are treatments that you can do. And there's simple things like you can squeeze lanes so people go slower. You can do traffic calming. You can put some things in play. But again, I would say it's an argument to be made, but that doesn't mean don't take on projects. But yeah, if something happened in between, could you have liability? Maybe. Sorry, maybe. But I think I would argue you're just making improvements.
So I have a slight follow-up question to my previous one, which is how dissent relates to liability. So suppose you have a discussion about making a safe road safer.
Mhm.
A majority of the council agrees with the city engineer, we're making a safe road safer, but a minority does not. A, can they voice the basis for their dissent? And B, would that create liability? Because it seems like a minority of the council who lost on a business agenda item should not be able to be pointed to in a liability case. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's really what the majority does that creates exposure for the city.
Unless you're using inflammatory, I've been on that road, I was almost killed, then you're not going to be sued individually,
Right.
but you're creating a record that they're going to say, you're an agent for the city.
Right.
So, just saying, I don't want to allocate the money towards this project, I have something else I want to do, isn't, going to get you there.
But what if you said, I don't think this makes it safer? Could you say that in dissent?
I'll be honest with you. My question is, are you a traffic engineer? And
Well,
I'm not
that's
meaning
a
that
good-
to be
no,
mean.
that's a good question.
Because, and I know I've got law enforcement in the room. I train law enforcement to not put things in the report
Mhm.
that say, this is a dangerous road, or
Mhm.
I have seen plenty of accidents. Because then I have had an officer who put in a report, this is a dangerous road that, I see frequent misses on. Well, they were the plaintiff's witness, and we had to say, are you a traffic engineer, sir?
Mhm.
How do you, again, you just don't want to be, there might be a perfectly good reason. You may say, I'm not in favor of this answer. Doesn't mean you don't think it makes it safer. I just don't like this.
So the real heart of it is don't make judgments that presume expertise.
Yes.
And that's true even if you are an expert, meaning if a traffic engineer was elected to council, they should still not weigh in.
Well, I would say they're acting as a council as a whole. They're looking at it. Just because you have an opinion, it is an opinion.
Mhm.
That you can voice opinions. I would just be careful. If you're an expert in that, you could say, I have an opinion. I don't like this treatment. I'm a traffic engineer. I disagree with it. I'm going to vote no. You're not saying it's a dangerous road and this will make it more dangerous. I'm kind of threading a needle a bit there, but think about what's that? Where they do. Thank you. Perfect. Perfectly simple explanation. And again, it's more how it comes across, and is it an opinion or a fact? All right.
So while I appreciate the council in this standpoint, I would suggest, at least from my viewpoint, we're here to advocate for our community
Mhm.
and to help make things better as
Agreed.
a whole. And for us to never say something's bad, almost as an abdication of our responsibility, to point out there are things that need to be better and
Yeah.
raise that as an issue.
Yeah.
And say, hey, I am concerned about item A, place B.
Mhm.
I think, at least from my standpoint, is part of our role, even if it creates liability,
Mhm.
to say, hey, this is not what we should hold ourselves to a different standard. We need to fix something. We need to take action.
And
Because that's part of our conversation about how do we set priorities.
And I don't disagree with anything there. I think what I'm getting at is inflammatory statements and using, saying I'd like to see an improvement. I have concerns and I'd like someone to look at it. You could. You're not saying it's dangerous. You're not saying I've seen bad things happening. So improvement is great. And that's exactly what you want to do. I'm not asking you not to look at areas to improve. It's more inflammatory statements that I'm concerned about. I'm not selling you.
No, because we're a deliberative body. There's 7 of us here, and it's to have us have 7. We're elected to have our viewpoints and represent both what we see and others. And while the majority of the time we're in alignment, there are times where we disagree with the action.
Mhm.
And the discussion comes out and well, why do you disagree?
Mhm.
Well, it's usually not, well, I really like pink better than blue. So I guess I'm just saying is that I think that we need to be able, at least, and even if it exposes myself in the city, we need to take action. Unfortunately, I've got enough run in my time when I've seen people die in the workplace because people didn't take action.
And
And so
I don't want to
and not-
discourage that.
I guess that's what I'm just saying is that
Yeah.
sometimes we have to push because of our individual backgrounds.
And I guess the other thing I would ask of you is you can push, but if the answer comes back that the engineering says that's not an appropriate answer, that you not override the engineering. And that's where, okay. All right. This is great discussion. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So in that we can do diligence, whereas like if I disagree with the council, I can approach an engineer and say, hey, I disagree for these reasons. Can I vet that first with the expert, right, before voicing the dissent?
If you're saying I want more information,
Yeah.
I think you would go to the mayor, city administrator and
Yeah.
say, hey, I'd like some more information. These are the questions I have.
Great.
And let's, and do that, get your questions answered through them.
Through that route.
Mhm.
Perfect.
Yeah, and just to Doug's point, the one thing that worries me about this is, yeah, there are some times that we are trying to be persuasive. And in being persuasive, I worry about where that line goes now of like, do I need to, it's like, now do I need to worry that in being persuasive, I'm being dangerous? I'm inflammatory,
Yep.
But, simple examples sometimes don't get the point across, but I've seen this with my own eyes and it's not anecdotal, it's happened, is a lot more persuasive than numbers or data, or it could, or maybe, so I don't know. That's kind of how, what I'm thinking of when Doug was talking about it. It's just that we do live here.
Yeah.
And it's our city, it's our streets, it's our everything. Our neighbors are the ones that bring us things. And so, yeah, I kind of worry that there is a little, and I understand that everything about risk is stifling, but it feels a little stifling.
Yeah. No, and honestly, I don't disagree with you. And that's where this is a tough line. And I don't disagree with anything that you guys are saying, that you want to be good advocates. Just know there's ways that it can be used against the city, and to be mindful of that when you're having those impassioned discussions. I think that's as much as I can ask. So, thank you.
I just want to say we trust and are grateful for our city engineering team.
Awesome. So this is an area, I ask that you do not leak executive session information, resist the temptation to share. I have heard people say like, but I hear so much really interesting stuff. No, do not share that information. If you have a conflict, please disclose that conflict and recuse yourself. So many years ago, I was in an exec session talking about litigation, and one of the council members was actually a plaintiff in this lawsuit. It was a community group, and it ran on behalf, ran for council after the lawsuit was filed. And I was thinking to myself, like, shouldn't she recuse? Never did. And the city attorney said, don't you think you have a conflict? No, I don't. And so I, do the right thing. There's a reason you have exec session, and that's mainly because you're talking, especially like in personnel matters, that gets into, you want to have those discussions and talk about performance of a public employee in a private setting where they can't be defamed, where there isn't going to be any type of claim they could make against you. And at the same time, when you're dealing with litigation, you don't want to, I guess, show your cards. And I'll explain that. Many times you will hear about what's happening in litigation. Here's where it's going. Well, do you think if the other side knew all of how you were going to defend the case, that's helpful? No, it's not helpful. And I had one city council that told the plaintiff exactly how much money WCIA was looking to settle this for. And so I sat in a mediation and I was making offers, and the mediator finally came back and said, Ann, just give me your top dollar. They already know what it is. And I was like, what? Pardon? And they said, well, a council member told them what your top dollar. And it was just like, really? If you were buying a house, how would you feel if the other side knew your top dollar? So when that happened, we then decided, and we advised the city, we won't tell you what's happening in our cases anymore. Sorry, if you've got leaks, we won't let you know what's going on. So please don't do that. This is an area that I just want to say, be mindful of written communications. Anything in writing, is subject to public disclosure. Again, you want to make sure you're using your city email address, not your personal, because of public records law. The city needs to retain any of your city business for public disclosure. And also, it is discoverable in litigation what you write, so be aware of that. Again, emails can be interpreted in writing, and that might not have been your intent, so just be aware it's all disclosable. Social media is an interesting area. The question is it a personal account? Is it an election account? Or is it to conduct city business? So there's been a lot of case law coming out about this. If it's your election activity account, that's not subject to public disclosure. If it's your personal account, that's not, it's an open account, but you don't have to worry as much as you do with your city business, because that is where you can create what's called a public forum. So one of our members took their personal account, then started talking city business on it. And the idea was that, okay, now you've created, because you're talking about city business on your personal account, that is something now that is, they need to be aware, and that you have to be able to produce your social media in public disclosure at the time. And so they basically said it's now a public account, city public account. And he also was allowing comment on his account. So he's talking city business, allowing people to comment back. And somebody commented back, and it was not a nice comment. And it was basically a hateful comment. And he blocked them. And it ended up that was a First Amendment violation, because this is a very specific, he opened a public forum. So when you are, opening up a public forum and you're saying, people come and talk to me, tell me what you want, I am acting as a public official, that agency, again, you're opening that up. And we had to pay a member of a hate group money because of that. So just be aware. And again, there's all kinds of articles on MRSC that are great on that.
I just took the AWC's social media training, and they had a really nice distinction that I've been following since I've been on the council, which is the distinction is between creating a post versus responding. So they said, if you initiate the conversation, or if somebody else initiates the conversation in a way that would be synonymous with like sending you an email, that creates the public record. But if it's these things where somebody else has created a discussion, has nothing to do with you, and you're responding to a comment, but nobody's solicited your opinion, they call that informal discussion, and that's not subject. And so they say, just keep everything on social media, informal discussion, don't create posts. And if somebody names you in a post, hey, council member so-and-so, what do you think about this? Don't respond. And the other thing that they noted that is probably in the back of your mind is the like button counts. So one of the things that the two of us who sometimes respond on there is, I never use the like button on your posts and he never does on mine, because that could be construed as some kind of communication between us.
Yeah,
It's only two away from quorum.
yeah.
Yeah, and I a lot of times I'll like, this is factually what has already occurred in a public meeting. But if you want to discuss it with me, here's my city email. You need to email. Like I will not debate you on anything. I will not discuss any.
Yep.
Like I will tell you what has already occurred or what's been put out in another forum by the city.
Right.
But like soon as it wants to get into like back and forth, well, here's my city email or my,
Perfect.
you can contact me that way. Because people they'll try to relitigate, and it's like, no, not doing it here. And in my day life, I'm a federal employee, so my account's pretty locked down already.
Yeah.
Because we're told to do that. So, it's already not open. So it's like, well, you have to be open. No, I don't. This is my private account. But yeah, I took that course a while back, and it scared me a little bit. It was like, you gotta be real careful.
They do a really good job,
Yeah.
and I would encourage to keep up on AWC and MRSC advice on this, because they do a fantastic job.
I did also like, they pointed out in that the change in the law from where it used to be assumed if one of us spoke on something, the assumption legally was we were speaking for the council. And now legally, the assumption is unless the council has designated us to speak, the assumption is we are not. And so that was a case law distinction change, because we're a lot more protected now than we used to be in that case.
And I don't have it in here because we don't cover OPMA, but that I've seen all kinds of, hey, let's go for drinks. It's like, and you have a quorum. And, and now there was one council that kept doing that after council meetings. And it was like, so everybody's saying you're violating OPMA when really they were just, there socially. But yeah, so it's interesting, that OPMA can come into play. So that is all I have for you. I really appreciate the questions. I think it was great. I love when you challenge me. That is fantastic. So, and I come from a very warped world. So as you can tell, my world is one that most people don't encounter very often.
I just want to say thank you. I was really looking forward to this. The city administrator and I had discussed some of these issues, and I had a lot of questions that you helped to answer tonight. And I think, just from my colleagues' context, part of my hangup was the difference between what is right on the letter of the law versus what creates risk. Those are two different things. And you can be right, but in order to be right, you have to win a case. And you're worried about things that happen long before that, like settlements. And that's part of the whole risk calculation. So even though you're right, it may still create unnecessary and unhelpful exposure for the city.
And cost. Lots of money.
So Ann, I want to thank you on behalf of the city as city council. I want to also salute you on your discretion. You gave us a couple examples without citing any jurisdictional neighbors those examples stem from. These weren't just theoretical statewide points. I would be negligent, because you're the executive director, to not touch ever so briefly on a specific point for council. We're entering budget session, and we're looking at a relatively large six-figure increase in our premium from WCIA. Do you want to comment on that? And one of my questions was, is that experiential to anything we, encountered here for you? Or is this a general premium increase over your rate base, so to speak?
I will say that, and The overall increase is 3%. So it starts at 3%, then it's modified by your loss experience. You have a significant loss experience. Then it is also a factor of your worker hours. So as you add employees, that's how we calculate risk. So you have a base rate, a modified rate based on loss, and then you have a multiplier of worker hours. And so we can walk you through that when it comes, exactly how it was calculated off the top of my head. I do know that where a bigger part of your increase is worker hour increase, the additional worker hours, and there's a lag on worker hours, just so you know, because how we collect it. So it's a 2-year lag. And then
So there's some catch up here going on.
there's a
as
little
well.
bit. And then there's also what can happen is you have a 5-year loss look back of losses of 5 years. So over time, as bigger losses fall off, your experience rating gets better. So, but you have had loss, I will say that.
So in that vein, are all workers equal? Or
Yes,
so doesn't matter what the worker does for us, they're all considered equal as far as
yes,
increased costs? Okay,
yes. For WCIA, other pools do it differently. All workers are the same for WCIA.
okay. Because I'm just thinking, you said increase in workers over the last 2 years, and I'm thinking of what department we've plussed up the most in the last 2 years. Yeah,
And I will say, reducing risk is probably, the biggest thing you can do to reduce. I mean, we cap the really big numbers, the really big losses. So one big loss isn't going to hit you. It's usually several, losses that can hit you pretty hard. And so
I didn't want to outright say it when Chief was here, but basically the cops cost us more. That's what I was looking at. That's what I was trying to get at. Are cops more risky?
and I will tell you, other pools charge more for law enforcement worker hours. That they do look at law enforcement as more risky, and they charge a higher worker hour dollar for that. We don't. We treat everybody equally.
Well, again, thank you, Ann. This was
Thank you very
most
much.
enlightening, and those that weren't able to be here tonight to council will make sure they review this conversation, and do say hello to Candace for me and us,
I
if
will.
you would.
I will.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
We're going to move on, council, to agenda item 5B, derelict vessel program presentation. And we'll do an introduction here. I've
Heard them say a few times where they talk about risks related to certain bills, like at AWC, not risk itself, but they'll talk about like, if you change this bill, that could increase your risk in this way. Yeah, so like risk liability. So I haven't heard them talk about it by itself, but I've heard them talk about it many times in relation to something the legislature was considering.
So Ms. Gordon will introduce herself here in a moment. We're glad you're here. While you're listening to her presentation, keep in mind, and I was invited but unable now to make it, there's the vessel turn-in program being managed by the Washington State DNR, and they're going to be presenting here tomorrow, I believe, in Port Orchard. There's an invitation, and so as you're listening to this presentation and you'd like to find out more and do it in the first person, there's an invitation available for the morning.
Mr. Mayor.
Looks like this.
Mr. Mayor,
Here we go.
If I could I just wanted to thank Brittany for taking the time to come and provide this information. As you may not know, we've heard a lot from Sergeant Hausberg and Officer Tim about their involvement in a much broader activity and looking at derelict vessels overall. And this is really hoping to provide that bigger picture. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction and for the invitation, Administrator Gelder, and thank you for having me. I'd also like to quickly just point toward the back of my room. My supervisor, Kirby Messabu-Yobek, is also here, and she's our program supervisor. So, yeah. So today I'm just going to give an overview of some work that we're doing to improve our approach to abandoned and derelict vessels in Kitsap County waters. So a little overview of our program. In 2024, we received a grant to begin developing a local program for abandoned and derelict vessels to serve the waters of Kitsap County. And this program builds heavily on DNR's existing derelict vessel removal program. And our program seeks to address abandoned and derelict vessels from all angles holistically. And so that includes both prevention and removal. And we do that through education on safe boating practices and available resources. We've developed a lot of resources and are working with DNR to utilize more of their resources, such as the vessel turn-in program and their reimbursement opportunities. We also are approaching it through enforcement and helping to train some of our law enforcement officers in the process. Also listening to our law enforcement officers about the challenges and barriers that they face and trying to help them improve those and break down some of the hurdles that they face, improving partnerships, providing resources, and just really improving communication and collaboration. So our program development, we heard from our stakeholders and from the Ecosystem Coordination Board that abandoned and derelict vessel issues were a priority in Kitsap County. And so Kitsap County Department of Community Development applied for funding to develop a local abandoned and derelict vessel program that builds on DNR's existing program. And we received that funding and began developing our program in 2024. We received $200,000. That was just for the DCD staff time for program development. It doesn't include any of the work that our sheriff's office is doing, which is extensive. And we actually supplement this a bit with some of our internal funds as well. And our funding source was the EPA National Estuary Program through the Habitat Strategic Initiative. And our grant ends in December 2026, at which time we expect to continue the program once it's, it'll be developed, and we'll just be implementing the program and kind of adaptively managing it over time. So our process for developing the program, we started by recruiting technical experts, which we had done some pre-work toward that goal before we applied for funding. We developed a charter for the program. Then we had to break down the existing process, and that took a long time because there was a lot of misunderstandings about what the process really was. There's a lot of legal nuance to abandoned and derelict vessels in the state statutes. We had to learn the statutes because our staff didn't work, derelict vessels wasn't our area of expertise. Then we worked with our technical committee to identify barriers and challenges and to develop solutions and then implement those. And kind of ongoing, we're adaptively managing, making tweaks as we need to, constantly coming up with new and more ideas and solutions. And we have a great group of partners who are very full of ideas. And ongoing, we're continuing to improve communication, support, and collaboration, which has been really great. So we grew this technical committee, which is almost 50 people now. And through that process, people kept saying, oh, we need additional partners. Like we need to hear from the Coast Guard. We need a rep from the Coast Guard. We need the Navy to be present. And so we continued bringing in the folks that we felt we needed. We've been meeting regularly since 2024 with this group. And we used our program charter to set our committee direction and objectives. And our technical committee includes DNR, port districts, cities, county departments, state and federal agencies, law enforcement, tribes, and more, including like the Washington Public Ports Association has participated, Boat US Foundation has participated, and some others. As we broke down the existing process to identify the barriers and challenges, we learned that ADV law is complex, nuanced, and very influenced by Washington's rich maritime history and culture. And so we worked with DNR to improve our understanding and our partners' understanding of the existing process and the resources that are currently available through DNR's derelict vessel removal program, which is a lot. There are tons of resources available through them. It's just not everybody knew about those resources or knew how to access them. Some of the challenges that we identified with our partners were there are a lot of authorized public entities, and that's a legal term that's defined in statute within Kitsap County. And so as vessels move between these jurisdictions, it can be hard to track what has moved far enough, what has come into compliance, who the owners are. So there's been issues with communication and folks not knowing who to contact at different jurisdictions. The custody process is somewhat lengthy, and identifying vessel owners is a huge challenge. A lot of time vessel owners don't want to be found. And so like there's, registration numbers have been scratched off and hull numbers have been scratched off and things like that. Funding is a challenge and is still a challenge, especially for enforcement capacity, and the local authorized public entity does have to, they can be 100% reimbursed by DNR for vessel removal costs, but they do have to front the funds if they're going to do a vessel removal themselves. Lack of custody facilities, like Kitsap County does not have a dock or really a boat launch that's appropriate to take derelict vessels to, so we have to ask permission from one of our partners to use their facilities. So that's like one challenge. Vessel auctions and sales can be a challenge. A lot of vessels that get auctioned off for very inexpensive tend to be the vessels that we see again and again and again. Federal drop-offs was a really interesting challenge that we didn't expect. I guess when the Navy or the Coast Guard takes custody of a vessel that's adrift, their policy is to take it to the nearest safe harbor, which can mean pretty much any public facility. And so we've heard from our port districts who have had a vessel dropped off in the middle of the night. Sometimes that vessel has caused damage to their facilities. And so that's quite a challenge to take on. And then just general lack of knowledge, education, and outreach about the whole process. As part of our work, we developed 4 focus groups. We really keyed in on what solutions do we want to try to tackle here. One was a vessel tracking database. A lot of people told us we'd really like a database where we can, input, certain vessels that have been abandoned and derelict, or that have had extensively expired registrations, things like that, so that we can communicate better with as these vessels are moving between jurisdictions, and kind of look back, oh, this vessel was posted in this other jurisdiction. Okay, maybe I'll contact them, things like that. We also decided to pursue a local vessel recycling event. That's the one that we're having the media day for tomorrow. That is funded and sponsored by DNR, and they have a great vessel turn-in program that is accessible all year round, not just during this event. But we're kind of doing this emphasis on Kitsap County. And we've had, I think, over 20 vessels that were part of that program being removed by a contractor. Public and partner resources was another focus group we had, and that's just where we work on developing any sort of training materials, pamphlets and brochures, instructionals, guidance that would be helpful for our partners, because this is kind of a complex process to work your way through. And then we had a legislative policy and enforcement focus group, and really just listening to our law enforcement officers about what might be helpful for them and what types of challenges they were encountering. Our vessel tracking database, I won't spend too much time on this, but we're rolling it out in September. I pretty much talked about what that is, and it's not really intended to be like, it's intended to be used by authorized public entities, and rather than really the public, and it's more of a communication tool for our authorized public entities to see where vessels have been posted and what the status of those vessels is. There are also 2 public-facing databases right now. Sorry, one is hosted by DNR and one is hosted by Boat US if the public does want to access a more publicly hosted database. Those are really good options. The vessel turn-in program event, DNR provided $300,000 for that event in Kitsap County, and we had 27 vessels registered. 19 of the vessels are in the water, and most were sailboats. That's really good because those are higher risk vessels for becoming abandoned and derelict, because, well, they're already in the water for one, and for 2, sailboats can be a little bit harder to haul out. And the contractor that we're using is Ballard Marine. And just a reminder that the DNR vessel turn-in program is available year-round, as long as they still have money in their biannual budget. For any vessels that missed the deadline or were too large to qualify, we only took vessels under a certain length.
Yeah, I was going to ask, does that 300,000 come out of the same fund that we have to apply for reimbursement from if we pull this?
So it is all in the DVRP, although DNR had gotten a grant from NOAA specifically for some additional vessel turn-in program events, and this was one of them. So not exactly, but typically the vessel turn-in program is funded by the derelict vessel removal account, but I don't know if they separate those regular vessel reimbursements versus the VTIP program. I don't know how those are separated, or if they're completely combined. Some of the resources we've developed, vessel removal guidance, a vessel removal log, a process tool outlining the process, some brochures, and we're going to be putting on a workshop for private marinas this fall. One of our success stories, one of the ideas that one of our law enforcement officers had in Port Orchard was that getting better enforcement on unregistered vessels would be helpful because when vessels had been kind of continuously unregistered, that it seemed that they might be at risk of becoming abandoned or derelict. And so the group did put together some recommendations for updating the definition of a derelict vessel, and that actually Kitsap County commissioners supported it, and then it was taken on by Representative Addison Richards to the legislature, and it was signed by the governor. And so that was helpful because now vessels that have been unregistered for 2 years or more can be in a year can be, or in a row can be tagged as derelict, and the law enforcement doesn't have to wait the 30 days to tag the vessel. So it helps a little bit. And we had some additional supporters there. Port of Poulsbo was really supportive, Recreational Boaters Association of Washington, Washington Public Ports Association, and more. We're increasing our patrols and coordination, especially with law enforcement. We're doing some coordination with Department of Licensing. That's kind of a complex, another set of statutes that we're not as familiar with. And so trying to understand some of their nuance with like vessel sales and titling and things like that. We're exploring some custody facility options for our sheriff's office, and continuing to work on any future policy ideas or training needs. Couple focus areas. In March, DNR was able to remove 4 vessels in Finney Bay. These were all, I think, owned by the same owner. And then we've been doing some focus in Liberty Bay, trying to do more frequent patrols with Poulsbo Police Department, DNR. Port of Poulsbo's had more of a presence, and we also got the Marine Mobile Pump Out program out there. And so just working together. DNR's led removal of 4 boats, 2 more are pending removal. Last I heard from Poulsbo, they had posted 10 and they were working on removing 1 that's sunken, so it's going to be pretty costly. And our sheriff's office has removed 2 and posted 3 more for custody so far. What's next for this year? We've got 2 more technical committee meetings coming up, and we'll be continuing those meetings quarterly into the future as long as our technical committee wants them. And we're continuing to implement solutions and expand our partnership. So we're doing a little bit more work with Kitsap Community Resources and Housing and Homelessness Partners to see what kind of resources we can offer when we make contact with folks, reaching out to Department of Licensing and learning about their challenges. And the U.S. Coast Guard and U.S. Navy, due to turnover, is kind of always in need of additional coordination because they have a lot of turnover. And yeah, we'll just keep adaptively managing the program as we go. So huge thank you to our partners, and continuing to collaborate is going to be a big key for us. Thanks.
Very concise, very organized presentation. Thank you. I'm sure council will have a question or clarification. For my part, and we've discussed that here in our role with the derelict legislative effort last year with Addison Richards. We note that I think the boat fee registration in the state of Washington is like $6. It's a relatively minimal amount. Might a next step, and has there been any discussion in your committee, specifically the legislative group, maybe moving from 6 to 12 to better fund without making it an onerous burden for boat owners?
Yeah, I think that would be something for us to discuss with Department of Licensing. $6 for boat registration.
It's 43.25.
43. Okay. I was going to say that seems.
But maybe we can make it by foot. So when people have.
No, there's various components to the registration. One is your excise tax, and that's 0.5% times the value of your boat. But there is a line item in there about derelict boats. And that line item, at least last time I looked, was something along the lines of $6. There's 3 or 4 components in the license fee. One is surprisingly low. So from the standpoint of resourcing.
Yeah, and I do know that a good portion of DNR's derelict vessel removal program funds are from
Yes.
boat registration.
The one boat that submerged that you referenced up here with Poulsbo Police, that's already going to be in the tens of thousands of dollars, going to exhaust that fund, just like that. So we are interested in exploring with the legislature an appropriate increase in the one fee that Councilman Newell just spoke of to better fund these efforts, not just for our sake, but for everybody. So who had a question or comment? Councilman Tabor.
How is working with the city of Poulsbo and our trajectory has been like, we've been funding this resource. Our marine unit is since 2 years. And yeah, how is it to work with us overall?
Oh, amazing. The officers have been great and the port's been great. And I think it's a little bit, it's a challenging area because you've got part county, part city, port. It's obviously a very popular destination. You have lots of services here in town. So, it's a challenging spot because it's a place people want to be. But everybody's been great to work with. And DNR, just real quick on the way that reimbursement works is that the local government does front the funds, but they do contact DNR beforehand to make sure they have enough money in their fund, and then they set that funding aside for that.
And that's calendar
The
cycle?
big boat. I think it's a biennium.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, yeah, we've talked about the, lobbying to the next step to be increasing the fee 6 to something. We've thrown out 12 as a double, but it's still pretty low. And just, I have to be contrary. That idea to change the derelict vessel definition that came from our also right there. He started reinforcing started enforcing our bay. It was one of the things he briefed us on early 25, late 24. And it was a highlight of this is one of the challenges is because this definition holds us back. So, yeah, so we started that whole, let's get the thing changed. Let's get everybody on board and get it going. And yes, Addison was good enough to run with that. But yeah, that was that man right back there who said our hands are tied a bit because, it's real easy for them to just go below decks and hide and hold it, and we can't do anything. So I want to make sure Dave got credit.
Well, thank you.
So on that note, and following up on Councilman Eckert, our chief is here and our Marine unit, which we have very much invested in and activated over the last 2 year, Officer Housework. Would you want to, either or both of you want to come and brief council on current status, and then they're able to also share that with the county, obviously, with them seated here. So I'm inviting Officer Housework to come up front.
Should I?
What exactly would you guys like the update on? Just in general, everything that's going on?
Since you last reported out, yeah, and anything that complements the remarks we heard tonight on those programs.
Yeah, these guys are a good partner with us, and we're part of the advisory committee. So we also attend the meetings as well and try and stay in the loop with the port as well. As you guys know, we're just dealing with this sunken vessel. And it's expensive, so we're working on that, and hopefully we'll have a date of we have a contractor pick, so hopefully we'll have that out here before too long. But the rest of them are tagged. If you don't know, our boat went down and is still down currently, although it sounds like maybe it's ready to pick up. So hopefully we'll get that back on the water soon. For those of the drone show, you saw that we didn't have it out. That's why. But it is. Jeff is Officer Tim has taken over kind of the day-to-day task before the boat went down of keeping on top of the people that are out there. He's doing a great job. And at last count, which I believe you said was 10, or someone here said 10. That's about right. Several of them have voluntarily just left. There's a few left that are stubborn. We'll keep working on that. But he's doing a good job staying in contact with them and keeping the pressure on to get them to move on. So we'll just keep that up, hopefully when we get the boat back soon. So
The two folks that you guys arrested when they came on shore, what happened with their, you might have put it out, I don't remember. What happened with their boat then that was out? Because I know they came in on a small boat, but they had a larger boat out in the bay.
that's a great question. And I wish I knew the answer to that. My assumption is that it's still out there, but Jeff would, or Officer Tim would know better. I don't have that answer for you. Yeah.
Any other questions? I find it useful and coincidental that shortly we're going to be hearing from Kim Hendrickson on our homelessness action plan. And I noticed in one of your slides, Ms. Gordon, you identified homelessness as an outcome of some of these activities. And we very much found that to be true. I had raised up my flagpole on my Mayor Ed Stern account about derelict vessels and that it did have an element of homelessness. And the recreational boaters and the liveaboards just lit up, confusing themselves with not the problem we were encountering. And so that clarification that there is homelessness taking place on the waters, that is not recreational and it is not liveaboard. It's a specific thing. I'm wondering when Kim comes forward, that overlap and the continuity with that. So I'd invite the county to sit tight and hear our homelessness action plan. Part of it might be relevant to the work of Officer Hausberg and the rest that's going on. Any other questions for either? Thank you. And you're invited to stay a few moments on our next presentation. Thank you.
Can
Thank
we get
you.
a couple minutes for a
Yeah.
bathroom break?
We have a request for a break?
Yes,
How long,
please.
Council?
5 minutes at most.
We're going to adjourn for a 5-minute break and reassemble here at 6:45.
You're going to leave between.
So council's going to reconvene in the workshop format. The next, we're going to be presented by our Health, Human Services and Housing Director, Kim Hendrickson, and a summary for the next item. In April 2026, City Council expressed support for a notice of funding opportunity, or the acronym NOFO, a NOFO, related to the city's affordable housing tax that will support and incentivize the creation of shelter, transitional, emergency, and permanently supportive housing, which is another acronym, STEP, referred to as STEP housing in the city of Poulsbo. And to give us that update, here is Kim. Good evening, Kim.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. What a beautiful evening. I'm so happy to be here to talk about something that I've been working on for quite a while. A notice of funding opportunity being created by an ad hoc group working with H3 to help us think through how we can spend the city's affordable housing tax dollars to their maximum effect to create more low-income housing in Poulsbo. Before I get to the NOFO, I want to give a little bit of background to council and for people watching that might not be familiar with why we're here tonight. Way back in 2020, our former mayor convened a group of subject matter experts to consider affordable housing needs in Poulsbo. Coming out of that early affordable housing work group, there was a recommendation to pass a local affordable housing sales tax, a 0.1% tax here in Poulsbo to support affordable housing. That group also recommended allocating parcels of land for affordable and deeply affordable housing. It turns out that the city took that action in a couple of places, both at a piece of property called the Triangle that now is the site for the Nordic Cottages, and also in the Klingel Natural Area. So again, thanks to the actions of this early group in 2020, council decided to pass a local affordable housing tax, and we've also set aside a couple of parcels for deeply affordable housing. Just a reminder for the public, the tax that we passed can fund 60% housing that serves 60% AMI or below, people that are making 60% of area median income or below, but not just an income qualification. The tax must serve people at that lower income level and people with behavioral health conditions, people with disabilities, veterans, senior citizens, people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness, and domestic violence survivors. Further, according to state law and a resolution that was passed here in Poulsbo, 40% of this affordable housing tax fund can be used for behavioral health services or housing services that are outside of this description that I have on the slide. Every time I talk about the affordable housing tax, somebody asks me what the AMI is in Kitsap County, so I have a slide on that for your information. When we're talking about 30% and below AMI, we're helping the lowest of the low income, housing size of 1 with an income of $27,500. For a family of 4, $38,900. We are really talking about very deeply affordable housing at that 30% mark. A reminder that the tax allows us to serve people making up to 60%. So those numbers are higher, of course, than that 30% mark, but still quite low, especially when you look at families of 3 and 4. Planning under the leadership of Heather Wright came to council between January and March of this year to make some presentations and look for some council recommendations about how we can create more affordable housing in Poulsbo. Coming out of that workshop series was clear guidance from the council that H3 was authorized to establish a competitive program to create a structured opportunity to create housing and shelter in a kind of NOFO form or notice of funding opportunity form for for-profits and profits that might be interested in building low-income housing here in Poulsbo. Council directed H3 to come up with some sort of a process to get solicitations from the community on this kind of housing, but had an extra request for H3. The request was that this housing have a step focus. What's not just low-income housing, but housing that serves the purposes of shelter, that's the S, T, temporary or transitional housing, E, emergency housing, and P, permanent supportive housing. So again, back in April, as a result of these planning conversations, I was directed by council to come up with some sort of process to spend our affordable tax funds to generate some creative ideas from the communities to build deeply affordable housing that fits in the STEP definition. Just want to thank publicly the members of an ad hoc H3 group that's been meeting now for a couple of years to think about questions relating to deeply affordable housing and very much helped me come up with an idea that I'm presenting to you tonight. Members of this group are on your list. They've all given of their time very generously to help us think through in Poulsbo how to create deeply affordable housing. So now to my update to you tonight. Working with Deb in finance, I can report to you that our affordable housing tax fund has a $1.4 million balance as of last month. I will be proposing in my 2027 budget that we use $240,000 of this balance for behavioral health. As you remember, that's an approved use of 40% or less of that tax fund. Finance has recommended that we put aside not only $178,000 debt service each year, and that pays for the Nordic Cottage project, but that we have 2 years of debt service in reserve at all times. And that comes out to a total of $356,000. So I'm sputtering a lot of numbers, but the bottom line is we have about $626,000 in our housing fund that we can consider putting to the purpose of a new program. Staff suggests that we do an initial grant amount of $500,000, release a notice of funding opportunity that has that $500,000 award amount attached to it. We think that's the right amount of money that will solicit real attention from the community and might actually generate a meaningful project. Staff strongly recommends that we do one award. Instead of having that $500,000 be available to multiple organizations to do STEP housing, we're going to do one because we do have our own staffing challenges in finance and H3 in planning. And if we do a single award, it will cut down on the administrative burden. Staff also strongly recommends that we use this grant funding for last dollar financing instead of early project financing. We want to make this money available to projects that are ready to go and are on track for completion. And then these funds are used at the last part of that building project. And the reason we feel so strongly about that is we don't want to make investments that don't come to fruition. We want to be funding projects that are in actuality about to open and help our Poulsbo residents, and that last dollar funding will help us with that goal. The ad hoc STEP group developed a draft notice of funding opportunity, which is in your packet tonight. I don't want to go through the entire NOFO because I know that you've looked at it or have it at your disposal, but I will just pull some high-level things from their recommendations. It's really important to the ad hoc group that this NOFO is attracting a wide range of potential applicants and a wide range of ideas. Council's given us strict instruction that this needs to be STEP housing and housing for that 30% and under AMI price point, but let's make the rules flexible after those basic requirements. We hope that faith-based organizations apply for the funds. We'd be open to tiny homes or cottage developments. Funds might be used for micro units that don't require a subsidy, acquisition of existing units of housing, mixed income housing developments that include some units of STEP housing, but perhaps other housing at higher affordable housing or even market rates price points. We're interested in mixed use, and we're particularly interested in partnerships, public-private partnerships, partnerships between faith-based community and other agencies, housing authorities with non-housing authorities. We're really hoping that this NOFO gets people thinking creatively about how to bring deeply affordable housing to Poulsbo. The NOFO is a draft version. I'm hoping tonight to get some feedback from council. So what you're seeing here is our first ideas. As I mentioned before, the eligible uses of funds are going to be broad, but we would rather not award any funds until the project is near completion. So our thought is that the funding could possibly offset early project expenses like impact fees or utility connection fees, but compensation would not occur until the very end of the project to assure us that the project is going to be completed. Applicants are, of course, encouraged to propose creative financing strategies that maximize the impact of our $500,000. I think that the city can offer more than financial support. Many funding programs for affordable housing require letters of support from municipalities or county governments. Once we choose a project, we can support with advocacy on the state level, on the federal level, letters of support. I think the awardee will find that it's not just the funding that they benefit by, but also city support and advocacy as well. Again, very rough cut at point ratings. This will be refined before any sort of NOFO is issued to the public, but we certainly will be giving higher scores for projects that can show organizational experience, the capacity to build things based on prior projects. We're really interested in quantity as well as feasibility. We would award higher scores to a project with more units being produced than less. Something that's come up in the ad hoc committee that I really want to stress to council tonight, there's a strong interest in combining recovery services with housing. The city, of course, has its own suite of recovery services at the Recovery Cafe and the Recovery Center. We'd be especially interested to hear from applicants and would give priority to applicants that can find some way to combine these sorts of services with housing, maybe ground floor services with upper level housing. When we're serving folks at that 30% and below AMI level, we have found there's often a need for extra support services, behavioral health services, healthcare services. Combining our services in recovery with housing, I think, is a recipe for housing stability and further success.
Kim, quick question. What do you mean by that? Do you mean as in moving your operations to the new location?
I do.
Okay.
I do. As council is well aware, we are renting in our current location. Those rental costs, and I say this with deep respect for our property management company, who have been wonderful, are very expensive and will undoubtedly rise in the coming years. City is paying over $70,000 a year to pay for rents for our recovery services. We're very grateful for the home that we have now, but I don't think that's a sustainable model. So yes, if there was an opportunity to go to a permanent location that combined with housing, that's an area that the ad hoc committee is really interested in exploring. Is that possible with this small amount of money and the difficulty of building in this economy with local land costs? I don't know, but maybe a NOFO is a way again to get people creatively thinking about how this might work in practice. A timeline, very loose and subject to change, but we'd like to refine our NOFO and our ranking criteria and come back to council to make sure it's matches what you're interested in producing in the fall. Have some sort of community workshop where we can actually showcase some demonstration projects, maybe in other jurisdictions, to get people thinking creatively about what it might look like to combine services with housing, what it might look like to do a tiny home village for folks at that very low AMI position, maybe experiments with senior housing and how it's worked in other communities. We'd like to select our application panel in November, release a NOFO in December, collect applications in January, do some interviews and announce awards in February of next year. Again, these are tentative timelines. I just wanted to present an idea to council tonight, just to give you a sense of how this might spin out in the coming months. At the request of Mayor Stern, I've included a map that includes a parcel that's part of county surplus property. I will let Mayor Stern speak to himself. I don't think the intent with the slide is to say this is property that we should purchase in order to encourage step housing. I think it's more to open up a conversation about the possibility of land acquisition in other locations as well in order to support our efforts, both for STEP and for the Blue Ribbon Commission. Mayor, can I turn things over to you to talk about the slide?
So this parcel goes back to conversations between Commissioner Rolfes and Mayor Erickson, actually. I've had a couple sit downs with Commissioner Rolfes since. It is the intention of the county to surplus this property. It is adjacent to infrastructure. It is, compared to most of our available parcels, readily buildable. And so that makes it fairly unique because we're very constricted with land that is relatively flat and infrastructured. And so whether this is STEP or workforce or a third purpose, a combination of any of those, that would be up to council and feasibility. But I just wanted to let you know, the Klingel property and some of these others are encumbered and difficult to work with. A great deal of the costs would be absorbed just in making it land use ready rather than the structures for the purpose themselves. And so this is a relatively attractive parcel that I think the council should consider sitting down with the county on and exploring options. What would you add, Kim, in that regard?
It's premature, but at least as a thought experiment, I think that the NOFO would be much more powerful if the city expressed an interest in possibly providing land alongside of it. But again, that would be a council decision whether land was used for this purpose or for a different purpose. But I certainly think that one of the main costs driving any sort of affordable housing development is land. And if this is a parcel that's relatively buildable at a price that's relatively affordable, I'm glad that council's
I
considering.
believe it's about 3.5 acres in round numbers.
I think so. I went to go look at it today. I'm really bad at describing location, but there's so much new construction around College Marketplace. I found this parcel by like winding through some of the new development around College Marketplace. And what I like about it is it's very close to Highway 3, which would make transportation pretty easy.
And the North Kitsap Bus Transfer Station, it's right behind that townhouse construction on the lowest part of the College Marketplace. So open this up for conversation right now, specific to the NOFO, of course.
I have a couple more slides, Mayor, and then I'd be happy to defer. The ad hoc group has questions for council. No expectation that you'll answer them tonight. Some of these questions are quite considerable, but I just want to give you an insight into what this group is thinking. As you all know from the process of building Nordic cottages, there's an exemption in our local code to allow housing authorities to waive zoning requirements subject to city council approval. Poulsbo Municipal Code 18310-050. Housing authorities can find exemptions to zoning requirements subject to city council approval as long as they're building properties in the city that are filling the needs of our comprehensive plan in terms of affordable housing. The ad hoc group wants to know if you'd be willing to extend these same zoning exemptions to other developers that are building low-income housing. It's only housing authorities now. Would you be willing to extend it to other developers? Other questions from the ad hoc group. Could a successful applicant apply for future funding, or is it a one-time only fund? Awarding $500,000 in year one is terrific, but what if there was $200,000 available in a subsequent year? Might we open it up to the same applicant if they can show a compelling reason why? And finally, if funds are not spent that first year because we don't have any applicants that meet the city's needs, would these funds roll over to a subsequent year with additional funding, or would we keep that funding of $500,000 steady as a first grant opportunity as we go along? And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Well done, Kim. Questions from council. Michael?
The easiest one for me is the question about, can a successful applicant apply again? I think if you have somebody who is a good moral collaborator and is producing a good product, then yes, I would hope that they would be able to be a partner again in future funding iterations. So that one's the easy one for me.
Rick? Oh, Doug?
A couple thoughts, Kim. I guess from just in this specific questions, I think when you do the workshop, it's going to be extremely useful if we can game it a little bit. We collectively, maybe not council, but we game it from the standpoint of, you mentioned identifying a couple different things that could happen. One is it a service provider that we get into a purchase agreement over time for services? Or does it become something where we are the owner and there's a separate operator? Or does it transition that we, the city of Poulsbo, are the owner and operator? And so I think there's a couple different paths that can get into providing that. If we have somebody that's willing to build housing and then we are leasing it from them over time because of however the finance is structured from their standpoint, that would get us into opening up, well, yes, there's a recurring payment to make that happen. So I guess the answer is, to me, is in providing a couple of the latitude of different paths. Your question about providing land, I think that we should be explicit about the fact that the city of Poulsbo is looking for long-term solutions, and that as part of that, we are extremely interested in being the landowner, or open to being the owner of the land and providing that as a base. That may be something in addition to the 500,000, depending on how it comes in. I think we sit there and don't want to give the answer, because I think the great part of this is getting more people to stare at it and bring new ideas to us. So the last piece, you specifically asked about exceptions for housing authorities. I think the short answer to that is yes, we should figure out a way that allows us to define our actions in this community that we're building, whether it be 10 units or 30, whatever the number is, that we are open as a specific action to provide the rules and regulations that make sense. Whether that be changing density, whether that be some setbacks, whether that be mixed use from the standpoint of the co-location next to housing. So the answer to all of that is probably yes, but I think the most challenging part, or the most critical part, is your workshop and being able to go, here's some solutions that we've seen in other parts, and they're not the answer, but they're examples of potential. Because this is loose enough right now that it's sometimes hard for us to imagine, well, what are you looking for? Do you just want a hotel? Exciting stuff. I think your timeline is dead on. I think we need to press the issues out there. The reality is, with the timeline, we're looking at a solution that's at least 18 months away.
Yeah, for sure.
If not longer.
Yep.
So if we just keep making steps forward, then
No, thank you so much, council member. And I just will latch on to one of your many comments about the importance of long-lasting affordability. What you said about owning land and land assuring long-term affordability is very meaningful to me, and that is one of the things we did right with Nordic Cottages. That will stay permanently affordable because the city owns the land that the cottages are sited on.
Yeah, and what we've talked about is there city-owned land that's buildable, kind of collectively? I think the short answer is probably not. Yeah. But if we are willing to commit as a city some of our land, in addition to the 500,000, that I think that extends to us needing to buy land.
Yep.
And as part of, our land ownership mayor going forward, the parks plan and stuff, rationalizing the property we do own around the city and what makes sense. Is it a hold for future use? Is it hey, we need to exit these pieces? Might make sense. We've talked about the Klingel property probably for decades. What is the best use for that? Not to be answered as part of the NOFO, but I think as a separate action. There's other pieces of property that of that are up in various places that we own that might be on the record, but we're not deriving value. Do we rationalize by selling some of those and separately buying land for this purpose? So I think that I don't want to rule off that, hey, they can have free land if it's stuff we already own. I think we need to invest in land that's buildable and supportable and makes sense because of access and the ability to provide the services and support and housing that our community needs in this space.
Final comment, council member, if I may, and I'm looking over at Deb to make sure she doesn't grimace when I talk about budget, but the way we figured the affordable housing tax budget, there's about $640,000 in there after we put money aside for reserves and behavioral health. With a $500,000 grant, potentially there's $150,000 in that affordable housing tax fund that could be used for land acquisition, plus any proceeds from a sale of existing property. So it's not impossible.
I think we need to be open in the selection that there might be a two-step. If it comes back and says, hey, we need to buy parcel A that we don't currently own.
Yep.
And it's more than 150,000, that we need to be able to have that as a rational discussion. Conversely, please don't take that off the table as a solution. I think there are pieces that make sense that we just need to go hold. Similar to what we did with the Public Works facility. We bought land for the future, and now the future looks like it's a year or two away. It's not dissimilar to that. We need appropriate location for this to happen. This is critical. I absolutely think it's critical for our community. You've proven it already with what foothold we have. One slice of the continuum of getting people help. This is just adding onto that journey for these people.
Rick. Yeah, I have things for you, Kim, but first thing is for you, Mayor. The property that you showed the county, looking at that map, it's outside city limits and it's kind of surrounded by other parcels. So I'm curious how that would work. I mean, it seems like even trying to do a UGA swap, that's going to be, it's an island outside the UGA. So I'm not sure if your conversations got that in depth or, to how we would make that work. Cause I'm starting to think utilities and things of getting there. So if you have any more information about that, I'd be interested.
We're currently running those trap lines with council,
Oh.
kind of concurrently.
Thank you, Rob. And so then, yeah, again, as far as your stuff, the NOFO, there was a lot of things in there that sort of like came right up to it, but didn't specifically say, would we be looking for a match from whomever we gave the grant to? Because it kind of touched a lot
Yeah.
of points, but we didn't specifically say you'd have to match. So
I'm so glad you asked that because
Yeah.
that was a point of real debate and discussion at our last ad hoc meeting. We don't want to insist on a match and we don't even want to prioritize a match because it is possible that someone comes forward with a project that already has funding and all they need is this last little bit of funding to complete it. Or that I'll just make up a project. It's tiny homes where you could build 10 of them already for $500,000. So in the spirit of encouraging creativity, the group was hesitant to say we will prioritize or only give projects with matching funds, but clearly, if it's a larger project or a complicated project, we will only award funds where braiding funding is shown and people have a history of being able to form these sorts of partnerships.
I appreciate that. It just combined with the end, wanting it to be the end state.
Yeah.
If it's a project that is only going to cost 500,000, we're funding the whole thing, which then doesn't necessarily get us to and making sure it happens by funding the end. So matching kind of encourages that completion because it's like, well, you get halfway there, we bring you home. So maybe it's not a 1-for-1 match. Maybe you can double up with another match and it's not going to be an independent. So you got 500,000, you're already matched to another 500,000. We don't need you to have an independent 500,000, but I just definitely want the project owner to have skin in the game. And so if there is no match at all, yeah, a small project, we could still conceivably fund the whole thing.
Yep.
But otherwise, yeah, we've already talked. These kind of projects aren't going to happen without us. So, I mean, I think everything else you put together there, as far as the questions, considering housing, like treating them like a housing authority, if they could reoccur, and I forget the last one at this point. But I think a lot of it just depends on what we see come back, because it's going to be, yeah, if they have a successful project and now they want to do another one or something further. But we're opening this up to a very, very wide range of potential. If it's an emergency shelter, that's very different than
Right.
building housing.
Right.
So I think a lot of it is probably, maybe, but we'd have to know more before I'd be willing to say yes. It's probably, I think most of the answers are probably, but details are important. And yeah, I mean, if we do a big housing project and then they want to add an emergency shelter a year later and want to come back, it would be looked at it, I would see as a different project. And so, sure, look at them again, but details are going to be what determine those answers.
Doug Tabor and then Doug Newell.
Thank you for doing this work, and thanks to the ad hoc committee. In general, yeah, kind of aligned. Just all of these are probably, especially I like you're going, with a wide net to look at the options to find the best potential, right? And you don't want to close doors. You want to see what's out there. And I think doing that makes sense at this stage. And as we learn more, we'll define things more, definitely. And I think the big thing for me is coming up with apples to oranges comparisons, and having a dollar amount impact consideration once we have, identified options, and being able to say, like, what's our goal, for housing this year? What are we accomplishing? And being able to have that defined. But I look forward to it. This all looks great.
Thank you, council member. And just to second your thanks to people that are involved in this project. When I think about the many volunteers on the Blue Ribbon Commission, plus the dozen volunteers on this ad hoc commission, there's a lot of community members in Poulsbo that are willing to give their time to create affordable housing. So I'm really excited about what's going to come back from the NOFO, because so many people are engaged in this topic. It's really nice.
Yeah, just back to the funding stuff, and I didn't see it in here, but I think we chatted about it. Maybe it's in here. The ability to go after grants and funding from other sources I would think that because of our commitment for the 500 plus potentially land, might open doors for us to go into the state's capital budget or to other third parties that are interested in this, whether it be foundations, and just maybe explicitly stating that we are willing to partner with to help open doors or to make applications for other sources of funding to bring this thing over the threshold.
I appreciate that suggestion. I would just clarify that we'd be happy to support an open doors. Doing applications would be beyond our capacity in H3, but I think letters of support, somehow defining it so there's a fair expectation about what we could do to help these grantees.
Yeah, I guess it's just really opening up the thought process. It doesn't need to be only private money. There is the potential for other public funding.
Yeah.
Having an applicant help identify those sources, we're willing to hold their hand.
Yeah.
Is on their applications.
Yeah, one of the really great things about the ad hoc committee that's assembled to write this NOFO is their willingness to stay involved post NOFO. This could be an advisory council that could help applicants find funding sources, help explain federal rules around accepting certain kinds of funds. I really hope that this ad hoc group turns into more of an advisory board to the grantee after that entity is selected.
Yeah, I think we talked about before, and I told you I would support the idea of this turning into like an LTAC, but for this type of housing versus tourism, where it's a formal advisory board, and then this becomes a reoccurring process. But I agree, Doug. Other grants and all that. I just feel that a person taking on a project like this, like I said, they have to have some skin in the game. And if all the money involved in it is somebody else's money, especially if it's somebody else, it's all governmental money and none of their own, it makes it easier to walk away from a project when it gets hard. And I don't want them to walk away from a project when it gets hard. I want them to have, yes, they might be invested because they care, but when it gets too hard, and we know how building in this state can be. So I want them to have, something in it for themselves because they put money into it. They put the time and also, there's an investment. And I think, unfortunately, that tends to be dollars. But, feelings take you so far. Dollars get you there. So yeah, we'll do the money part. We can help you get money from other folks and with support letters and saying, well, we gave them this much, but folks, this isn't going to be easy for anybody to do. So we want serious, committed, knowledgeable folks involved in this. And maybe it's a, third to 2/3 match or something, but I think having their own investment in there might be important.
So I'd like to turn to City Administrator Rob Gelder. He's in Kennewick attending the Washington City County Managers Association, but attending remotely at council. Rob, based on the feedback you're hearing from council, but more specifically, the suggested broad timeframes that Kim presented tonight, what might you suggest are next steps as far as council consideration and potential points of action?
I think we can capture all the notes from tonight, and then I can regroup with Kim and sort of help to refine kind of next steps. But a lot of the questions are there on the table in terms of how we can progress, whether it's in a combination of land and dollars. I think some of the questions that I heard in terms of leveraging current properties, repositioning them, that is an exercise that would serve us probably well in the long run. So there are a lot of different points that I probably can't provide you with a point by point roadmap at the moment, but I think we can get back together, Kim, and we'll come back.
Thank you, Rob. Any last questions from council, or Kim, any concluding remarks?
No.
Very good one. Thank you very
Keep
much.
proceeding. I think you're on track.
There we go. So we're going to move on to the last firm agenda item, that's 5D, and that's the update the city Poulsbo's homelessness to housing action plan. And that is something I requested of staff and Kim specifically. It's essential to being able to deal more effectively and better with those in need, including our homeless populations, and will also enable police to better integrate in delivering those in a humane sort of way. So this is an essential plan. It's a step laid out by the state. In fact, steps you must take in order to result at a product that can deliver services to people in need.
Thank you, Mayor. I invited Chief Harding to come join me for this presentation because I think this is one of many examples in Poulsbo of the power when the police department and Housing, Health, and Human Services work in strong partnership. It's working really successfully in many other areas, and I think it will work especially successfully when we're thinking about better ways to address our unhoused population here in Poulsbo. I have a slideshow. I think I'm just going to hold for now. I'd rather talk about something that happened today and have a more informal conversation and then turn to the plan because I think it might resonate more that way. Why do we need a homelessness to housed plan? Why can't police just tell people to get out of tents and go find a place to live?
And that question really kind of frames the discussion that it's a complex issue when we're trying to deal with homelessness. And one simplistic solution, or I guess option, has been, well, just make a law to trespass them. It doesn't fix anything. So trespassing is a tool. Sometimes it's appropriate and we will use it when we can, but there's parameters around that law that make it challenging for us to enact it. And then it just pushes people to some other location. It doesn't solve any of the issues. So the story Kim's going to tell, I think, illustrates some of the complexity and I think really helps understand that this is an issue that will require government services from a lot of different areas, police, housing, human services, all of us. So it's complex.
Yeah, I'm going to tell a story, and this is not intended as a success story or a celebratory story. It's a hard story, but it culminated today, so I feel like it's appropriate. There's a woman in town, I'm going to call her Susan. She's in her 60s. She's got some pretty significant health conditions as well as mental health conditions. She came to Poulsbo last winter fleeing a violent situation. She's been living in lots of different encampments, very unsafely, covered by a tarp. I've heard from our officers, high fear of poisoning, living in a tarp with a heating unit. What is distinctive about Susan is also somebody that likes to hoard items. So Susan leaves shopping carts, bags, clothing, trash, where she goes in Poulsbo, to the great anger and frustration of citizens and businesses. So there's been a lot of calls about Susan. Why can't you just tell Susan to get housed? I'll tell you the complications with Susan. Susan comes from some really violent history, and she's afraid to go back into shelter. Susan has health conditions that shelters cannot accommodate. Susan has a little cat, and many places won't accommodate somebody with a pet. Susan takes what we might consider to be trash and treasures it as critical belongings, and she doesn't want to give that stuff up to go inside. Susan, for many months, rejected any sort of offer for help. Lastly, Susan, at the end of the day, as a strong will, and Susan likes Poulsbo, and Susan didn't want to leave her situation. Today was an incredible day for us, and again, it's not a success. It was just a milestone. Thanks to hundreds of hours from the Poulsbo Police Department, and particularly Officer Justin Black, my team at the Recovery Center, a trip that I made out to Tacoma to invite some of you all to go see a facility called St. Anne several months ago, and getting to know folks at St. Anne a little bit better, and months and months and months of just finagling, trying, combining kindness eventually with trespass, and most importantly, finding a way to vaccinate Kitty and make that kitty safe to go someplace else. Today, Police Navigator Josh drove Susan to St. Anne in Tacoma, and she now has not only a safe place to live permanently, should she choose to, but a place that will attend to her medical issues as well. Now, the reason this isn't a celebratory story is one of my staff that's been working on this, her name is Julia. She's a wonderful employee. Julia told me the news today that Susan finally is housed, but she didn't tell me in a way that made her happy. She wasn't smiling. And I just realized in that moment, this was just a few hours ago, the unbelievable toll, the complexity of bringing somebody from homelessness to housed is. So much so even today on the penultimate day where we finally got Susan housed, my employee is exhausted. It's so much, and it's so risky, and it's all so tenuous. So I just wanted to bring to your attention before we talk about a plan that it's not easy. And when we all get calls from people in our community saying, I'm sick of seeing Susan and her trash outside, there is no easy answer to how we're going to get Susan housed. Anything you'd like to add to that, Chief?
No, I think it's just because we're invested in solutions and understand the complexity and the layers to provide housing. It's easy for people who aren't and just see this issue as a nuisance. Their intent isn't bad. It's just that they're wanting a solution that's quick. Trespass them, kick them out of the park. But they don't think past that, because we have to have a place, or they just move to another community and someone displaced from that community comes here. So I think you understand the issue. I'm not telling you something you don't know.
But just because it's complicated doesn't mean we shouldn't do it, and we can't do better, and we can't continue to bring people off the streets into homes. So
Yeah, absolutely.
when Mayor Stern came to me several months ago and in response to phone calls from community members wanting to know what we're doing, asked if H3 might work with the police department to create a homelessness to housed action plan to up our game and get even better at making this transition, I was really happy to take on the assignment. And what you see tonight, sorry, not in your packets, but in an email that was sent out that will be available to the public, is our first go at making an action plan to be even better at the work that we're already doing. The action plan has 3 central components. We want to coordinate the internal response in the city. We're working really nicely together as H3 and the police department. We'd like to be working more closely with parks. We'd like to be working more closely on a regular basis. So we have a core group of homelessness response here in the city that meets on a weekly basis to determine who needs help, who's providing that assistance, who's taking the lead on particular issues. Even in our little city, we sometimes duplicate services or don't know what each other is doing. So it's just a way to align our approach. We also want to expand shelter and housing. As the chief has said now a couple of times, we can't get people off the streets without a place to take them. I think the council's interest in that NOFO to produce step housing is an enormous step in that direction. And we'll just keep working on that NOFO with the understanding that that's part of that plan to take people out of homelessness and help them be housed. We also need to lean more heavily on our external partners. We've tried that at H3. Some council members have been a part of that effort to form larger regional councils to get more funding and attention at building countywide solutions. Sometimes it's more successful than other times, but we have to keep trying. And finally, I want to say the part of the plan, maybe I have a vested interest, but I think is so important. The council has been so consistent in funding recovery services. Please keep that investment going because housing will never solve the issues that result in homelessness. It's that combination of getting people the services, the emotional support, that feeling of safety and support that they need to move on in their lives that really is the key part of homelessness other than the housing itself. So a quick timeline just to bring to your attention. We'd like to bring something back to you in the fall that's a more refined version of this plan and has a little more detail to it. What you're seeing tonight is just the draft. In October, we'd like to suggest that council actually codifies this plan, perhaps through a resolution, so we can have something in the city of Poulsbo that shows unconditional city support for coordinated strategies to get people off the street and into better situations. We'd like to start working on benchmarks to share with council and the public. This fall, I'd like to work with the police department to be able to, maybe with names, maybe not with names, but actually start to quantify how many people are living outside and what is our progress in helping transition people so we don't just coming back with stories, but we actually can come back to you with actual results from this plan. We'd like to come back to council with a 3-month report after we work on this for a while and let you know if we're able to achieve our benchmarks and if not, share with you the reasons for the obstacles and what council might be able to do to help. So would welcome any questions or comments. Thank you.
Before I take questions from the council for Kim and Police Chief, there's a parallel to this situation right now too. Very close parallel, but not associated. We're investing in a diversion program for our courts where police can make or hold the threat of an arrest, incenting that individual to engage with the court, resource recovery, all of it. But it's based on both a helping hand and the incentive of a hand coming down hard. And in the case of the other program with our courts, it depends on a prosecuting office in the county being able to pursue. Right now, there's a question of the resources available to the prosecutor's office because of budget stringencies with the county. And the courts, specifically our courts here locally, are concerned with people remaining dedicated to being in that program if there isn't the threat of an arrest. The parallel here is, in order to interdict and help these people, it's not just a question of offering these services and it being apparent to everyone and anyone, oh, this is the way to go, but it's also the threat of trespass. But they need to come in a balance with each other. We're really working with human nature here. And so I just wanted to distill that thought, and we have a parallel need and program in the courts that very much tracks this same program of a helping hand and a heavy hand coming together to make a hand shake. and incent that individual to move forward. So on that note, questions, thoughts from the council? Michael?
Mayor, before you move on, this is the partnership, and I'm so proud of it.
Mhm.
Susan was housed today because Justin in our police department, who's a very caring officer, said, if you don't go somewhere else, I'm going to have to trespass you and you can't go
Yeah.
back again. It's this combination that has effect. So thank you, Mayor.
Exactly. Michael?
Thank you. I think this is one of our most morally urgent issues. So I think this is essential work. And I just wanted to ask a kind of quick question. I noticed quite rightly on page 3, you talk about shelter and transitional housing in Poulsbo and North Kitsap, sort of recognizing that we're going to be servicing beyond our jurisdictional borders. So I just wanted to ask for the homelessness coordination group, in addition to the Poulsbo Fire Cares, if you're going to be adding partners outside the city limits, since the more we invest in this, the more there's going to be boundary blurring as people in need outside of our borders have nowhere else to turn. I wanted to know what other partners you're interested in bringing in besides city partners.
Chief and I have talked about having 2 different groups, an on-the-ground coordination group that meets on a weekly basis just to coordinate city response, but a higher level policy or advocacy group that can think about how can we work together outside of the city of Poulsbo to make sure that the county has skin in the game, to make sure that Bainbridge is contributing if it's Bainbridge residents that are using our services. I feel very strongly that we do have a moral obligation to help the residents of Poulsbo, but other jurisdictions are a part of this equation as well. So yes, council member, but I think there's an important distinction between the local coordination group that's thinking about the Susans and the policy coordination group that's thinking about the COC funds, the CDBG funds, the capital funding from the state. I think there's 2 different levels, and I'd like to invest in both of them. Thank you.
Who's next? Rick?
Yeah, and I think some of it's already going on because, I mean, like Poulsbo Fire is already more than Poulsbo. We've already done the work with the house in Kingston. So yeah, I think you've already recognized the greater need, but we do keep pulling it back to our borders when we need to. And so, yeah, it sounds like you already have a plan, kind of keep the distinctions separate, which is important, but it's not a hard wall that we can't work across. We've already done it. Yeah, I think it looks great. I think it's a draft. You've got more work to do, but you're definitely on the right track, both of you. You said about coming back with, success with or without names. We probably don't need names, but I'll just note, for the rest of the council, the mayor and folks, the handful of times that I've reached out to Kim and said, hey, I just saw somebody I think needs help. She's always known exactly who I was talking about. With at most 2 sentences of a text, that description is enough that she's like, oh, that's Susan. Or that she already knows exactly who I was talking about, just in that little tiny bit of information. So I know you already know the names. So, as I said, great. I think it's great work. And yeah, I mean, we can only do what we can do. We're not huge, but we can do what we can do. So, and there's I got to talk to you about lead after the meeting.
I did ask the county to remain here tonight. We touched on this earlier in the report on derelict vessels as distinguished from liveaboards and recreational boaters. I can't emphasize that enough. We also have homelessness on the waters. And it's really important with the derelict vessel programs and the ancillary supports that this get tied into it too. So there's many forms of homelessness. It's not just tents, it's not just tarps, but it looks like a pleasant little boat out on the water with a shining white hull. Not so pleasant actually on the boat. Yeah. So thank you for remaining for that. Anything else from council before we get concluding remarks?
Well,
Rick?
and our safe parking, and I mean, there's a lot of aspects. So
I would just say as a final comment to acknowledge the excellent work that so many officers are doing and my staff is doing. we're already seeing successes. Steps have already been made that I think we all know of, stories of people in this community that you've seen lives improve because of the approach that we're taking in Poulsbo. It's hard. We're doing our best. I just think that we can do even better. And I'm excited for the mayor's encouragement to help us up the bar so we can do what we're already doing, but just do it a little more effectively. Thank you.
Thank you, both of you. It is time for questions and concerns of the council and future agenda items, and you did have a list of future agenda items and proposed dates for such in the packets tonight. So, turning to council.
I should just mention briefly that there's one item that's not on there, but will be coming forward next week, which is Jeff Osmek and I will be having the follow-up LTAC conversation that was promised. So he and I have been working on that. So that will be part of our workshop for next week.
We appreciate Councilman Fitzpatrick taking on the chair of the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee and the new cycle that's underway and all the winnowing that has to go on to come up with a product. Doug Newell.
I'm just wondering if it might be warranted for us to talk about future agenda items maybe earlier in a meeting. Typically, we get to this at hour 3 and we're all somewhat tired. But from the standpoint of what do we want the priority on the next 4 or 5 months before the end of the year? What in that stack? Because there's several in there that are near and dear to me, but I'm like, when are they going to come up? Just to say, hey, what do we think the schedule looks like other than what we see over the next 2 or 3 weeks? Just throw that as an idea that maybe one time move the future agenda items up to go, all right, help us prioritize as a team what needs to be done.
Might be appropriate at when we approve the agenda itself near the top, because we're already looking at that item.
And I absolutely don't want this to be a every meeting. It's just, hey, there's a lot of good things in there, comments, things that maybe were an idea 6 months ago and, oh yeah, sorry, delete that. Or no, there's additive issues into this and it is a priority and we need to add it just from a standpoint of taking it.
I'm remembering, Britt, you or Ed, when this format first got adopted, wasn't that actually twice and it was at the beginning and end of the workshop agenda? And then you consolidated it to the one at the end?
That was part of the
I see.
streamlining during the council retreat.
Yeah, I think it was even before we were on council. There used to be 2 sessions of concerns of the council. When council first moved to the business and then workshop, that was on the agenda twice. So just
Perhaps we could use these workshop council meetings as a agenda review, so then it's per month.
And maybe just a little bit more structured led.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff in there. Here it is, it's 8 o'clock already. It's probably not warranted. Maybe we roll up our sleeves once every 2 months and take a roll through there collectively. And
Great idea.
Hey, what do we think about these?
And I was going to actually bring that up as well, because a lot of the ideas do come up and they're more like a concept or an idea, but we need to have better clarity from what are you looking for in terms of support or product from staff to actually bring to that conversation? Or is it just a placeholder to make sure that council has a conversation? And then we need to know what you need so that you can have a good conversation. So I'd like to actually bring it back as an agenda item unto itself.
Yes, agree. I think that's warranted.
Very good. Britt?
Since we didn't have official council comments, I just want to make a comment publicly, congratulating the Peninsula High School students last night for the light drone show. Yeah, it was wonderful. And I really enjoyed being in the crowd and just hearing their feedback. And I heard great things and people just loved it. So
Last night wouldn't have happened without the council's support and financial contribution and faith to move this forward. And I would hope early on in the new year, it'll move into the private sector with its own sponsorships and organization. And the city in the years ahead, whether it's July 4th or others, are just receiving a permit request to be reviewed through the park department and other processes.
Oh, I do have one more thing to add, which was, I think maybe if the city is going to continue being involved in some of these things, we might consider allocating funding towards a better PA system. Because at my end of the park, at the south end of the park, I really couldn't hear most of what was said in the pavilion. I caught little things, but most people couldn't hear what was being said. So sound system issues.
And we were lucky to have that PA system because that's something
know.
council authorized just a short 2
Yeah,
years ago.
That was, I know it was
Or
recent.
didn't even exist. I think
Just
we had a
feels-
little
it
portable
feels
one.
Somewhat entry level still. We're getting, you know,
It
big.
would have been my hope we could have used the band's amplification system, but that wasn't in the cards.
Well, maybe work that in with the emergency announcing system that Dan talked about. Maybe zones, and one of those zones is the park. You know, maybe two birds, one stone.
Very good. Thank you, Britt. I appreciate that a lot. Other questions, thoughts from council? We're going to turn to continued public comment, but there's only one public left standing. And I don't want to put too much pressure on her. So calling for public comment. Does anybody have any public comment? You have 3 minutes to come to the podium.
Move to adjourn.
And not seeing any public comment, we'll close that. And I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I second.
All those in favor say aye.
Great work.
Opposed? Council stands adjourned. Thank you, council.